Okay, let's have a look at a couple of the drawing tools in Illustrator. How many of you had a chance to try making one of those templates? Nobody? No? What were you working on for the last half hour? Okay. Are we missing somebody from the other group?
Oh yeah, Rohan's finishing up this stuff.
Okay, he's got to come in. Yeah, he doesn't want to miss this time. I'm going to download, this is from the class website. I put this on today called Drawing Tools Worksheet. It's in the handouts area. If you missed how to create the template that I was just talking about a few minutes ago, there's a video lesson on how to make that template. But I'm going to download this Drawing Tools worksheet for right now. I didn't mean that to be a PDF. Hold on. Let's see if I can open this up in Illustrator. Okay, so here's the Drawing Tools template. So this you can download from the website just so that you can get started with your drawing tools when you get ready for them. There are lots of different tools available in Illustrator, and we're only going to scratch the surface of the ones that you can use. All of the tools that we're going to be using are found along the toolbar on the left-hand side. I mentioned the other day, if your windows and your menus and your palettes get all out of whack and you can't recognize anything on your screen, head over to Window, Workspace, and ask for the Essentials workspace, just so that it resets your palettes and your windows back. If you don't like looking at these little icons, but you want to see the full palette, click this little arrow right here, and it will expand the palette so that you can see all of the different options. Okay. So each one of these palettes gives us options that we can use to control the different tools. One of the drawing tools, or the first one that we're going to cover, is a very basic one, and this is one that we had a quick look at yesterday, and it's the line tool. It's a good one to start with because it's so simple. So here's the line tool in the tool palette. You'll notice that a lot of the tools have this extra little triangle in the bottom right-hand corner. That means if you click and hold with the mouse, there are different options here so that I can create arc lines, spiral lines. I can create grids. Right now I just want to create a line, but realize that all of these tools with the triangle have different options underneath. So the regular line tool is pretty straightforward. I can click and drag to make a line. So if I click here and I drag a line and let go, it's created a line for me. If I want to change the thickness of the line, okay, so we refer to line is often referred to as, we'll say, AKA stroke. Okay, that's just another term that we use for a line. And so the stroke will determine the thickness of the line. So if I select the line, I'm going to pick up the first black arrow tool, and if I select the line, here I can adjust the stroke. We'll zoom in a bit. So this is the thickness of the stroke. If I increase this, watch the line. You can see it increasing in its thickness. This is measuring in point size, the same point scale that we use when you're measuring your fonts. We'll talk more about that later. I can also adjust the color of the stroke right here if I want to. These two color chips right here. This one indicates the fill color inside. This one is stroke color. It's set to black right now. If I change this to red and come back over to my line, we'll notice it's red now. If I change it to green, it'll change to green. So you can use this line segment tool anytime you need to make any kind of a straight line segment. If I hold the, I'll change this one to blue just so we can get some variety. If I hold the shift key down, I can make line segments that are perfectly horizontal or perfectly vertical. That's holding the shift key. Okay. So hold shift. To make straight lines. Okay, either up or down. And we can adjust the stroke color and thickness. We can actually adjust the positioning of these lines too. There are two selection tools here. There's a black arrow and a white arrow. I'm actually going to move down my diagram a bit here to selection. So I have two selection tools. There's the regular selection tool. And then I also have the direct selection tool. Okay. I'm going to break this up over two lines here because I just want you to know what's probably most important here is that the selection tool itself, the regular selection tool, is the black arrow. And the direct selection tool is the white arrow. The difference between the two selection tools, and the reason we've got two of them, one lets you pick up an entire object, one lets you edit the object. So the regular selection tool, the black selection tool, very common tool. This is one that lets you pick up and move an entire object, okay, and reposition it. Once I've got it, I can also do things like, if I zoom in a little bit more, you'll be able to see here I can stretch it. Okay. I can pick it up and drag it. I can also sit near the corner but not on it. I get those directional arrows and I can rotate the line. The white arrow tool, the direct selection tool, this one lets you edit the individual anchor points on here. So if I move near the edge of this line, you'll see the word anchor pop up there. And I can click with that white arrow tool and I can change the position of that anchor point. Okay? This seems like a very simple tool and a very simple technique, but you're going to realize in a few moments that that anchor tool, the direct selection, very powerful tool in terms of editing and positioning objects. Before we get too caught up on the direct selection, let's look at one or two other tools first. The rectangle tool. This is pretty straightforward. Here's the rectangle tool in the palette. Guess what kind of shapes the rectangle tool is? You guys are good. I'm telling you, you're good. Okay, so it makes rectangles. And I'll move back over to the sheet here. And you simply click and drag and it will make, here's a tall skinny rectangle. Here's a short fat one. Okay, guess which key you hold down to make a perfect square?
Shift.
Shift. Mustafa's got it. Okay, there's perfect square. So I'll zoom back out and of course these rectangles, we can hold shift for a square. Whoops. How's that? We can hold shift for square. We can also change the color of the. We've got color options for. Can't type today. Color options for both the fill, which is the inside color, and the stroke, which is the outside color.
We use the same tools you said before?
Yep, yep. So here I can adjust the color of the stroke, and here I can adjust the color of the fill. So in this case I want a black fill with a yellow stroke, and I'm just using again these same couple of tools. Okay? So that's the rectangle tool, in a sense. It is possible if you click and hold under the rectangle tool, because remember I said this little triangle means there's other options, there is a rounded rectangle tool and an ellipse tool. So if I pick up the ellipse tool and come back over here, I can click and drag and make elliptical shapes, or hold the shift key and make a perfect circle. Now you'll notice something interesting there. This last circle that I made just covered over top of the rectangle. So there is a stacking order to these things, okay? There are layers applied to these. So I can arrange to have objects in front or in behind. If I come to the object menu up here, I can arrange and send this object forward or backward. If I send it to back, it's now behind the rectangle. Okay, subtle, again, subtle little capability, but you'll realize a lot of potential with that overlapping later. You can make very complex looking shapes by taking two simple ones, just overlapping them together. The brush and the pencil tool, pretty self-explanatory. The pencil tool and the brush are just for drawing freehand lines. Okay, so these do a nice job of freehand drawing. And I work by stroke color here. So right now I'm going to set the stroke to a particular color, let's say red, and I'm going to set the fill to none at the moment. I'll go a little bit thicker. Oops, I'm adjusting the type. So let me pick up the pen tool here first. I had that type object selected, so I'm going to deselect it. Pick up the pen. Let's get set here with the stroke and the fill. And if I click and start drawing now, we'll see I'm getting a red line based on the thickness that I mentioned. Okay. The difference here really is that the brush tool will let you pick different brush tips and shapes. So you'll notice this shape that I just picked had an oval shape to it. So I'm getting almost like a thick magic marker. I'm getting that thin transition. If I picked up the pencil tool here, okay, and I'll use green for the pencil tool. Here's the pencil tool. You'll notice that it's just a uniform thickness for the line, whereas the brush tool I can pick different brush shapes. Now, like the line tool and even the rectangle tool, if I zoom in on here even closer, you might start to see them. If I pick up the direct selection tool, I can actually find the little anchor points here, and I can move these anchor points around to change the positions of the line. Okay, very powerful. Okay. It is possible to have a fill color for these objects as well. Okay, but something that you should keep note, and this will probably show up in one of your quiz questions too, in terms of filling objects in, we should only fill in closed paths or objects. Here's what I mean by that.
The line is open, so you can.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? If you think of it intuitively, if I picked up the paintbrush tool here and I made a shape that looked like this, if I tried to fill this in with paint now, this shape here, what's going to happen when it gets to the top?
All the screen.
It's going to try and fill the screen. It won't know what to do. In the earlier versions of Illustrator, it wouldn't even let you fill this object in with color until you closed it off. So right now we would call that, this is called an open path. Okay. So if I wanted to fill this object in with color, what I really should do is close off the path. So instead of making an open shape like that, make a closed shape. Or I'll show you a little bit later in another lesson how you can cut and open and close objects. But if I take this object now, which has a defined start and end, and if I try and fill it in with some color, it'll fill in now because it's actually a closed path instead of an open path. Okay. All right, let's look at the last and probably what I think is one of the most important tools to learn. And this is one that you're going to be able to spend tomorrow, I think, just doing some practice work. There won't be time to work on symbols. You're going to want to just practice. The pen tool and the path. Have all of you tried those connect the dot games when you were a kid? So you have numbered dots and you just had to connect them in the number in the right order. Well, the pen tool works pretty much the same way. So imagine you had a pen tool that could put those little anchor points down, and then it will just connect them for you. So I pick up the pen tool, I don't want to fill right yet, but I would like a stroke. I'll go for orange. And so I click, and it makes an anchor point. I click again, it makes an anchor point and joins it. Click again, joins it. Joins it. Just like connect the dots. And here I'm going to go back to the start. And if you look really closely, when I move the pen tool over, you'll see a little O pop up in the bottom corner of it there, a little circle. That means it's about to close this path. So that's it, it's complete. If I hold the Shift key down, it makes perfect straight line segments. And will let you very quickly make an object that's got 90-degree corners. But where things get really cool with the pen tool is the option to click and hold to make curved segments. So right now, we've been making, you just click to drop anchor points, and then the pen tool joins the anchor points. Okay, and this creates, when you've got two or more points with a line in between them, you've got a path. Okay, so any 2 points with a line in between is called a path. So I'm making multiple paths here with multiple points. The cool feature here is that I can click and hold to make curved points or curved paths. Here's how it works. I'm going to pick a slightly different color, pen tool again. For the stroke this time, again, I'm going to have no fill. For the stroke this time, I'll pick brown, fairly thick. And this time I'm going to click, and I made an anchor point. The next one I'm going to click and hold the mouse down and drag out. And I get that curved line segment. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and back to here. Now I've got a curved line segment. So I can start to make all these interesting kind of more organic shapes. Not everything we make is going to have perfect 90-degree angles. And if I want to edit it, let's say I don't like this extra little bump that I've got in here, pick up the direct selection tool, those white arrows, and I can pick this little individual anchor point. Right now this anchor point is set to be a corner, but I'd like it to be a curve. So I'm going to select curve, and then there it just curved it out. Or I can select any of these little handles and use them to fine-tune and position the degree of the curve. Okay, so let me add that onto here as well. Move handles to adjust the curve. Okay. Okay, we can look at what the Pathfinder is in another lesson, but you want to get to know these couple of main tools. They're very critical. The final thing I'm going to show you just relates to filling objects in with color. So we already mentioned that we can have both a stroke and a fill. So the stroke we know is the stroke is the inside color, or pardon me, outside color. Okay, or let's even better than that is more the outline color, whereas the fill is the inside color, right? We can also have what's called a gradient fill. And a gradient fill is like an interior fill, but we can have it gradient from one color to another. I'm going to make a perfect circle here. Oops, very good, thank you. I'm going to pick up the ellipse tool here. Let's fill it in or give it a bit of a stroke. At the moment I'll just pick gray. So there's the Shift key held down to make a Now if I fill this in with gray, let's say I want to make a bit of a sphere out of this. If I fill this in with gray, it doesn't really look like a sphere. It looks more like a disc. Right? Your symbols are supposed to look three-dimensional, like they've got a highlight and a shadow. So to make this look more like a sphere instead of a disc, click on the fill. But this time we're going to try one of these gradient fills. And so I need to open up, there's a palette here for gradients. It's right at the side right now. I'm going to drag it up and over. If you can't find it, you can click under Window and look for gradient. But here I can pick, and in this case I'm going to pick a radial type of gradient. So the minute I click that, I get a radial gradient from white moving to black. If I wanted the opposite, I can drag these two color chips around and just change the order of it. So now it's moving from white to black. And I can also adjust this position of this highlight. So there's an actual gradient tool on the toolbar. It's over here. And I can use that to position the direction of the gradient. Okay? I'm clicking and dragging a line to create the direction and the position of the gradient. So I can move it. If I say that the light's coming more from the upper right, then I can go ahead and grab it and move it to the upper right. Okay. If I want to change the color of the gradient, I can do that too by adjusting these little color chips. If I want it to be a red gradient, I can put red onto this color chip so that now I'm moving to, I don't think I really need an outside color here. Okay? So there I get a stroke and fill, and that's using the gradient function. All right.